Hello and welcome to Graceful Connections, presented by Academy for the Soul. I'm your host, Sophie Bidar, and the co-creator of Graceful Connections, together with Christel Hughes, founder of Academy for the Soul, the online school for intuitive arts. Graceful Connections is an adventure of exploration, discovery, healing, liberation, growth, and truthful expression, which is facilitated, amplified, magnified, and blessed really with grace. Because all our gatherings are held in the orb of grace, which is what brings forth these graceful connections. They are woven between you and our expert speakers, your graceful guides into the new dimensional earth. Graceful connections woven between you and their talents, their wisdom, their expertise, between your questions and their inspired answers, your needs and their masterful responses. But also graceful connections woven between various aspects of you that may feel or need, for whatever reason, disconnected, fragmented, separated. Allow grace to infuse these areas and aspects and connections, to elevate them to a higher vibration and bring harmony, catalyzation, realignments to a higher order, a natural order, the divine order. The order of grace is the divine order. So let's begin. I invite you to relax and take a few deep breaths. Breathing out all that does not belong to this moment. Let's bring all of your attention, all of your presence here and now. We set our intention that our time together, all that is shared in words and beyond the words, all the energies that we call in and flow serve our highest good, our evolution, and be of service to the highest good of all. You can decide to open your heart or open it even more and be ready to receive. And you can decide to open your mind or open it even more. And be ready to receive. Remembering your connection to the center, to the heart of the earth. Your connection to the center, to the heart of the universe. So that you are held, both grounded and suspended. You are safe, you can relax. You're ready and open to receive. Now I'm calling an orb of grace from the heart of the universe. And placing this orb of grace around our group, around our gathering, and each and every one of us. that we be held in grace and infused with grace all along our time together. Let's take a moment to adjust to the higher frequency, the subtlety of grace. Allowing it to gracefully dissolve, realign, harmonize, amplify, magnify all that needs to be so. In purest alignment with divine will and the divine order of grace. And breathe. Beautiful. Now, within the Orb of Grace, I'm delighted to welcome today's expert speaker, the amazing mediator of healing, Jean Ang, who invites you to work with the Arcturians to accelerate your spiritual development for non-dual love, compassion, and bliss. Now, many are familiar with Jean, especially for his transmissions of Arcturian frequencies for healing, as well as personal and spiritual development. But still, let me introduce Jean for those of you who maybe don't know him. Jean Hang, PhD, has a healing practice based in Thousand Oaks, California, and sees clients for a number of energy healing practices. In addition, he teaches seminars that focus on the integration of science, spirituality, and healing. And Jean travels both in the United States and internationally, facilitating healing sessions and workshops. He received his BA from Stanford in human biology and philosophy, religious studies, and his PhD from Yale University in neurobiology. His work centers around the use of subtle energy to restore balance and harmony to the body and the mind. So it is really wonderful to have you with us as our expert today, Jean. Welcome.
Hi, Sophie. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here, and it's quite an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, well, we are blessed to have you, to welcome you in the Orb of Grace. So, everyone, today, Jean is going to share his experience about his experience maybe, certainly, but expertise about working with the Arcturians to accelerate spiritual development, and specifically today for non-dual love, non-dual compassion, and non-dual bliss. So that's very inspiring, and it's going to be fascinating for sure. And we'll even get to experience this ourselves, as Jean will offer a transmission of Arcturian non-dual love frequencies. So we'll receive energetic patterns and information to begin understanding, practicing, and embodying non-dual love in our life. And on Friday, July 14th, we'll gather again with Jean for a Q&A Galore live call. Jean will take your questions, which can be about issues or healing intentions, and he will run Arcturian healing method frequencies for you and for the whole group on these issues and intentions. So that's going to be very powerful. Now, for the moment, let's tap into your brilliant wisdom, Jean. And I'd like to begin with asking you, who are the Arcturians and how can they help us?
Yes, and thank you for that introduction. Yeah, I connected with the Arcturians starting in about 2008 when I was on my own healing path, learning with different healers and healing modalities, and transitioning from kind of a life in professional life in research science and moving on into the kind of healing realm. And I had a very interesting kind of a visionary experience in a very mundane or normal location, like the kitchen of my flat that I was in Connecticut, and I heard a kind of intuitive voice say that I was Arcturian, and I had not even really remembered where I heard that phrase, Arcturian. And I went back and realized that I had read a book about 9 years prior, right before I started my PhD work, by Joshua David Stone, who some people might know, is a very famous or well-known ascension writer. He's kind of moved on into the spirit world, perhaps even reincarnated. But he was very connected with the Arcturians. But in this particular book that I was reading, he just mentions awakened extraterrestrials or interdimensional beings, and had mentioned like the Arcturians, a list of them, many that maybe people here already know as it's become more kind of widespread in the spiritual culture, Pleiadians, Andromedans, and so forth. And it completely, went over my conscious mind. But I believe the book, as many books written sort of in a channeled or connected way, contacted way, are transmissions in themselves. I had received sort of an internal transmission that when the time was right, in this case, 9 linear years later, blossomed or opened. And I went on to, in the next 2 or 3 years, explore what that meant. So it took some time to unpack at that point. Some of the highlights in that unpacking was to learn and receive the reconnection, which is Eric Pearl's work, which was Pleiadian or is Pleiadian based, as he's mentioned. So that was kind of a first opening into what I call interdimensional or star being consciousness, is who I think the Arcturians are. And this is more an anecdotal way of explaining the Arcturians from my own personal experience. And then I was reading very deeply, based on some of the training from the reconnection, the book by J.J. Hurtak called The Book of Knowledge, The Keys of Enoch, which is also very interdimensional, connected to sort of angelic beings, whole light beings, as well as what might be termed awakened star beings or extraterrestrials. And then finally, there are two other places that sort of opened up my consciousness to this connection. One, I did a number of trainings with Stephen Greer, who is very connected to contacting extraterrestrials since maybe a young boy. And he also came from a science or medical background, meditation background. And many people in that field know him quite well, and sort of the contact disclosure ET field. And he takes people like my background to places like Mount Shasta, Joshua Tree in particular. Those were two trainings that I had, kind of working under the stars, or so-called out at night. And we saw many amazing phenomena, what might be now termed unidentified aerial phenomena. And when you see those lights, what he was explaining, of course, not the human generated ones, but more these interdimensional appearances, you're also receiving a transmission, maybe a mega transmission or energetic light and information. So I think that helped to accelerate and open up my consciousness to direct experience of more internal or inner realities. And then finally, to develop the skills to work on this kind of directly on my own, I did a deeper training with the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, started by Michael Harner, which is a 3-year sort of shamanic training. And there I learned the skills to, mostly through the journey experience, to work with helping spirits. And in this case, sort of I see the Arcturians very similar to how a shamanic practitioner might see their helping spirits or angelic guides that are helpful in this context, healing. And so I was able to kind of unpack or directly explore this connection with the Arcturians.
Yeah, wow, what a story, starting from in your kitchen, right? As you said, a very mundane situation and place, and then how it unfolded. I guess you couldn't suspect at that moment how it was going to unfold. unfold and what was going to come from there. That's really, really fascinating. Now, do they have a specific field of expertise? How are they here to, what are they here to offer or to bring to humanity? What's their purpose? We can wonder in connecting with us.
Yeah, yeah, I think there's a number of levels that I've connected to, and sort of continues to be a sort of evolution or a learning process for myself. I'm sure for them, but I'm sort of maybe taking it from my perspective. And when I connected with them, because I was interested in healing, they are known to be very gentle, powerful, and effective healers in terms of kind of different light technologies or energy frequency technologies. And that's been the main thrust of my connection with the Arcturians. And like you were mentioning, I sort of package it in a way that I could present to others and calling it the Arcturian healing method. But really, it's just a form. There's a universal connection people can just make directly with the Arcturians. But those are mostly through different energy frequencies that can be useful for healing on the physical, energetic, emotional, mental, and spiritual levels. So that's been mostly my connection with them, and other people who've made connections to the Arcturians, and many have before I was even aware of them. Like I mentioned, Joshua David Stone has made that connection, and just some touch points on that. The kind of famous psychic, American sort of sleeping psychic from was saying that the Arcturians are kind of very well known for healing in the universe, and that Arcturus is like a way station, as many souls might come through that astral portal into this dimension to be born. And there's this concept that different astral portals based on either stars or planets allow souls to kind of enter this space-time realm of our physical Earth to be born in. So they kind of retain that memory either subconsciously or as maybe things unpack in their particular incarnation, they remember maybe earlier now. And this is what we might be terming star seeds, kind of a younger child or even teenager or young adult who's very much connected and remembering this transition or connection to the like a star portal. And so that was the first thing, is the healing. And then I think now it's also evolved, like what the topic is for today, more open sort of avenue, not just healing as we might think of it for the physical or emotional, mental, spiritual bodies, but also a transformation of consciousness to allow us to awaken to our deeper self. And a lot of this is a process of remembering. And then maybe the third level is just to realize that we're sort of allows us a process to awaken from this dream that we're only in the physical dimension, that actually in our midst is a very full spiritual reality with spiritual beings there to help us and connect with us. And this probably has to happen at not an instantaneous level, because that could be very destabilizing, but slowly, and I think on the planet, a very accelerated fashion. And maybe everyone here is kind of in that process of recognizing that the physical world is, a real dimension of ourselves, but within that, and maybe even more so, there's other non-physical dimensions and beings who are in our midst and that we're interacting with all the time.
Yes, yeah, okay. Beautiful. I love this evolution from the healing to the more, yes, the more deeper and more and more and more advanced spiritual realms, right? And today is totally in this today's conversation, sharing, and experience as well that we're gonna have, which is really a delight to anticipate. Is really really in this spiritual playground, and I love what has come through. I don't know, did you call for it? Has it been downloaded to it? Has it been given as an assignment, or is it kind of both ways? But I love the theme that has come to be offered for graceful connections. I find that it really matches really, really well. So non-dual love, non-dual compassion, non-dual bliss. Well, to me, I was reflecting on that before we come together. I felt like, well, this is typically very much grace, right? The non-duality, at least my own personal experience, my first, I would say, conscious experience of grace was really this sense of non-duality, and the duality having been dissolved, if only for a moment of conscious awareness. So with that, let's clarify, what do you mean by non-dual love, non-dual compassion, and non-dual bliss?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just coming to the first portion of your comment, yes, I do. You will, using that particular technique from the shamanic training, journey to which is just a way of altering my consciousness to come into more conscious communication or interaction with the Arcturians. So I did take a journey to ask what would be most helpful and appropriate as the topic or offering for this particular interview and telesummit. And that was what I received. I sort of perceived, just to explain a little of what I saw, some very high frequency Arcturians, I think more of a feminine quality, who kind of downloaded the packed information for this topic. And then the unpacking was just the beginning of the title itself, kind of for many people might already embody the transmission of the non-dual love, non-dual compassion, and non-dual bliss. But I think as to unpack this idea a bit, and kind of where this is coming from and sort of where I might be describing it from, those are fairly open terms. But I do think that many people, like I mentioned, the sense of us on the call, have had, like you mentioned, some glimpse or even sustained awareness of the perhaps deepest aspect of ourselves. Some might refer to it as the non-dual self, or the Atma, or the soul, or even other terms like the emptiness or void aspect, or the clear light aspect of ourself, which is a unified state of consciousness where there's less or even no subject-object dichotomy. But some people come to that intellectually first, but more and more people are then also having a direct experience, even what might be called like a satori in certain like Eastern religions. And of course, these usually aren't sustained. If they are sustained, perhaps person doesn't stay in the physical dimension for too much longer, just because of the unified and intensified aspect. And this physical dimension, of course, is in duality. So, but many people sort of so-called return back, kind of this chop wood, carry water, and then you become awakened. I think there was a famous book on this nature in the 80s or 70s. And then even though you have those deep unified experiences, you just chop wood and carry water again. Metaphorically, you're doing the same things with your physical body and personality, but you're doing it with a different level or frequency or vibration of consciousness, using terms maybe we're more akin to now. And so I think as humanity and the planet and sort of this leading edge are having more of these experiences, or like I mentioned, they're not forgetting on their incarnation sort of this time around. Many young adults, children are able to sustain that and memory of their unified state of consciousness, and are also, more importantly, being born into families, parents, and environments who are also kind of maybe in an awakened state, or at least supportive of that. So we kind of have a new generation that's coming through, maybe not hampered by their environment, but actually supported. So they're kind of advanced or on the track almost right away without kind of having to wait, for a kind of almost like another awakening during their incarnation. Either way, I think the planet has this experience, and maybe the challenge or the phase we're in now is, what to do with that here in this dimension of duality, like the physical dimension. So another analogy that's usually used, and I think the Zen Buddhist sort of teachings, there's a set of scrolls or paintings of how a person goes through awakening. And the very last painting or scroll is actually the sort of awakened person comes back to the marketplace. So the marketplace being sort of this our normal, I use the term mundane, but maybe there's a better term, just our normal physical world, and how to embody, that process. And I think maybe that's where the Arcturians and this theme is, we could call it love, compassion, and bliss. And in some ways, we experience that. And then we may have this unified state of consciousness. So maybe we experience that as a more discrete personality and body, a more individualized sense of consciousness. And then we have a more unified experiences. And then how do we come back and experience those same states with other people or other beings, or even just being present in the world?
Yes, because these are let's say easier to experience when we are in our own bubble, in our meditation, or in our own personal practice. But the whole point, as you highlighted, and really that's where the big challenge is to bring this to the daily life and to sustain, and there where the other is, and yet bring this non-duality, that there is no other, and yet there is the other is here. So how to reconcile this paradox, or this apparent paradox? That's the whole key question there. So what does it mean? Is there any, well, you have touched on it, but is there anything specific that you want to share about what it means to embody the non-dual aspects of love, compassion, and bliss?
Yeah, I think to unpack that a little bit, and thank you for the question and the insight in that, is one that we can do now if this is an interesting topic and people feel like, yes, I kind of identify with, having a lot of deep, what we call non-dual, blissful, unified states, but then I'm still like here, maybe trying to do well in my job, or in my relationships, or working with my children, or and so forth, or even just trying to survive physically, in a prosperous way, or just in a normal way. So I think one thing is to even remember our past lives, if that conception works for people, or even a past experience of this non-dual nature. And I think a lot of people, like I mentioned, this is my perception and also personal experience, as we are remembering our past lives, we may have had a lot of these, or at least some very deep spiritual experiences in those lifetimes. And that's kind of one of the imprints of why we came back onto the spiritual path, and would be interested in like a telesummit like this is already an expression of maybe past imprints or likes that we created. And that's good to recall those past lives where we did have those deep experiences, so that we don't feel like we're sort of starting from base one. Probably everyone is not starting from base one. And if one had thought that, it maybe is more in the subconscious. And then, like a lot of what I think the Arcturians, or these transmissions, the one that we'll experience here, just one's own search, is the deepening of the non-dual experience. And that might have been, like you said, in a long meditation retreat, which could have even just been a weekend or just a day where one, or even a moment where one had these experiences again. And I think a lot of those are seeds that were laid in the past. Maybe we think of past lives in this context would make most logical sense, but even earlier when we were younger, as seeds that were ripening now. And then this idea of process of embodiment, which I think is a term that best catches the phrase that I think a lot of people on the planet who are interested in these topics are trying to, I don't know if wrestle with is the right word, but is trying to learn at that state. Because in many lifetimes, maybe we were even highly realized in the non-dual state. But for example, we may have been taken care of by like our physical needs by a monastery or a nunnery or someone else. And so we didn't have to learn those challenges or that level. And now we're sort of in a different, much more in the world, but still remembering or having these deep spiritual experiences. So I tend to just kind of bring this answer to, or maybe an opening to the answer, but to a close is I usually use like a 7-dimensional model of ourself. So we have like starting from the most deepest and what our topic of the non-dual level is our divine self. That's just a label for this non-dual aspect of ourself. And then the spiritual level, which is starting to be in polarity, but is more our soul or Akashic record level. Then the causal, which is like our karmic dimension. Then the mental, emotional, etheric or pranic level, and then finally our physical. And so I think the process is really, we ascend up to the divine through certain experiences like having a retreat or even using certain plant medicines, which are very much more in vogue or popular, and where people are having really full-blown sort of deep spiritual experiences very quickly. And then the question is not so much whether those, let's say, plant medicines or meditation techniques can deliver that, but now what do you do bring that back? And so I think it's the process of using that model. We can kind of maybe unpack specific examples, but is how do you take that non-dual frequency or consciousness and integrate it back into the 6 lower bodies? So the spiritual, causal, mental, emotional, etheric, and then finally back into our densest body, the physical. So that's kind of the model that I think is helpful to use just as intellectually to understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. And for that embodiment and bringing it through the different layers all the way to the body, right? Are there practices or processes that can support us in this embodiment process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so usually, separate these sort of like non-dual practices. Maybe people have learned in different traditions or teachers or workshop and modalities. Sort of this, you can start with sort of an awareness of awareness, if you've heard that term, or the witness. And this is sort of like the direction into non-duality. It's not quite non-duality if people were to sort of really be fine with the words. Like if you enter the witness state, you're still witnessing something. So you're in duality as a subject object. But if you can stay in that, then somehow, like I guess through grace, you kind of slip into the unified state of consciousness, or a glimpse, like you said, is even enough to recognize like something is not the only way of perceiving reality, like as in subject object. And then a lot of sort of bringing it all the way to the physical as an example. I think a lot of then taking that and doing like yogic practices from that awareness, or even a sleep and dream yoga practices. I've learned some in the Tibetan tradition, but there are also like some in the shamanic or South American initiation traditions, probably in all traditions, Western, where we're interacting like in the astral world in a lucid state. So we're starting to sort of bring this deeper sense of awareness but working in our astral body, which would be the emotional mental body, maybe in like a lucid dreaming practice. And then there's some sleep practices, which are called sleep yogas in the Tibetan tradition, where you like focus on your heart chakra before you fall asleep, and you become aware of what's considered, they call it the Dharmakaya, which is a non-dual state, like a ground state of consciousness, but during your deep sleep, where most of us, in the normal state would just to be unconscious of that non-dual state of awareness. But then you're learning to become, you hold your light of awareness even as you fall asleep, and you're in that a deep sleep state. So here again, we're practicing how to bring that into our daily life, because everyone, will go to sleep at some point in the day and enter the deep sleep state, as we've studied in science or neuroscience, have the dream state and kind of maybe cycle through that even 3 or 4 times in an evening. But we could stay unconscious, or we could bring sort of our mindfulness to that practice, and then we're sort of starting to embody these deeper states of consciousness throughout the 24-hour cycle, in this case the nighttime cycle.
Yeah, beautiful. Many different ways that we can practice and bring it closer and closer. And it's obviously, plant medicine apart, and let's say extreme experiences apart that may happen spontaneously also, regardless of any medicine. Otherwise, it's more a gradual, I'm sensing that it's more a gradual process of opening, absorbing, like an infiltration. I'm seeing like water filters through. It takes how many thousands or millions of years to filter through the earth, and comes out purified, right, through this filtering process. I'm sensing that it is also a filtering or infiltration process, that the non-duality infiltrates our body very gradually, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think, even if we, I think, were to have sort of these enlightenment experiences, or like a very quick, instant Satori experience, or it could also be brought about, like I mentioned, and you mentioned here, like a plant medicine experience. But then it still would be a process of, oh, I've seen kind of that maybe highest, or one of the highest levels, and then how do I do that on a daily basis to kind of cultivate that and bring that to some sustained awareness that independent of anything external. So yes, and a little bit why it was just me bringing up the idea of past lives is uh, we may not be have remembered fully just how much we did in past lives, but it created an imprint, and those imprints are now kind of blossoming here, and then we can kind of also build on those imprints, and then we may be, if people think of future lives, creating future imprints where things come on board much faster in another incarnation, or we deepen it even to another level in another incarnation, or are able to then maybe even help other beings just by our presence.
Yes, and as I hear Eugene, I love hearing this. That it reminds me that, or shows me the perspective that we've done so much work, and I'm sure so many of our audience have done and are maybe still doing so much work of healing and tapping into the past lives and the ancestral lives, the generations before us, using techniques to travel, let's say, to travel into the past to bring healing to traumatic situations and to resolve, right? But the same techniques, the same approach can also, and as I hear you, I get the sense that we are being called to use the same approaches, well, to keep doing the healing as much as we do need to do healing, but also to go and gather the mastery, those imprints, that, as you call them, those imprints that are treasures of mastery, of wisdom, of skills, of abilities that are inherently ours, that we don't have the conscious awareness of them, but we can reach to them. And we have become, many of us have become very masterful at doing past life healing. Well, we can do past life recovery of the imprints of and of the mastery, right?
Oh yes, yes, I think so, very much so. There's probably a lot of like what I call subtle body structures and skills that are sort of what I would say are on the hard drive, just to use a metaphor that everyone kind of in this day and age would very much attune to. But they're not like you know, even though they're on our hard drive, they may not be accessible or being worked on in the daily programs that's showing up on our screen. And so just kind of like, or if you have an external, you know, those external hard drive data holders, and you need to plug it in and to access and get to some of that memory data bank. I think it's very much so with I think that would be at that spiritual dimensional level. And this would be another way to embody, after having these non-dual experiences, the spiritual level, which may seem a little more arcane, like how do we actually get to the soul level embodiment? And one of them is to recognize that because in the non-dual state, we realize we're not just this one incarnation. It becomes experientially maybe very apparent. And then if we were many incarnations, how do we actually access, or what would be practical from that is that there's data imprints, what I call subtle body structure, that one could access from one's Akashic records, and almost like pulling from your hard drive, you know, external hard drive, and bringing it onto your main computer now, so it shows up on your screen. You can pull those subtle body structures if they're relevant to what you're doing now, kind of more into this subtle body of this incarnation, and sort of have that express out.
Yeah. Wow. I'm saying a big yes to that. Do the Arcturians, so yeah, I mean, I guess the answer is in the question. As I was going to ask the question, I'm kind of hearing the answer, but I was going to ask, do the Arcturians support in that? And well, I'm going to let you answer, but I kind of got the answer for myself, but I'm going to let you voice it. I think it's going to be much more elaborate and eloquent.
Oh, yeah, I love the question. It probably has the answer in the question, but yes, very much so. And just maybe I know a number of people here, maybe everyone has experienced different techniques, and maybe are practitioners themselves. So I think it's really intention, and then to be in an altered state, like we alter our state, however that might be, to remember our past lives, like what Sophie was mentioning. And so whether that's hypnosis or drumming or meditation. So when you alter your state, then you kind of have more access to these, let's say, Akashic record fields, and then making the intention that you'd like to explore and download a particular past life that's useful to you now. So I think it's that clear intention in the altered state. It's less accessible if we're just sort of in this, you know, day-to-day, what they call beta brainwave consciousness, although probably still could be available. But the altered state plus the clear intention that you'd like to access a past life, or maybe multiple past lives, and the subtle body structure. And then usually our higher self, and perhaps the guides that we're working with. It could be the Arcturians, like what you were asking. But let's say someone just had their other guides that they've been working with more regularly. They could help you access your Akashic record field in this very specific way for what I would call subtle body structure skills.
Yes. Beautiful. All right. So before we get into more details of discovering what the Arcturians with you or through you, together with you, have to offer for this non-duality, can you tell us about why this is important for the evolution of the planet to come to an awareness of our embodied non-dual nature?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I think many people, we are probably will always have different challenges, both personally, as a group, and countries and on the planet as we're evolving. They may be more complex. Maybe they're less violent on the physical domain, but we're all kind of helping each other and working on ourselves in this sort of alchemical almost like they call it a sacred geometry cube of space-time. And so the more people and beings who've stepped out of the cube, which I think this could be metaphoric or literal. So when you have the non-dual experience, you're able to experientially, not just intellectually, step out of the cube of space-time. And this alchemical cube, of course, is very useful. Sometimes people call it a classroom or like an alchemical stove where things are very pressurized, as we probably know, but that also accelerates, no pressure, no diamonds is kind of that catchphrase. So, but if you can have you can step out for a moment or even sustain and then come back in, you're a much different person or being in terms of helping the issues. So when you aren't able to step out for that moment, then you're kind of really embroiled. You think that the issue is like super real, like real. But when you have stepped out and come back in, it's real. Like you wouldn't act kind of peculiar, but it's sort of real. So you're kind of outside the dream a bit. And I think you're ultimately a better problem solver. If you're just to use that very practical phrase, you can, when people might be kind of losing it at that moment, you understand that why they're doing that. But the reason that you're maybe calm is you've had that taste of being outside the box for a while. And so even though you still could help them within the box, you're not sort of completely embroiled in it. So I think that even that slight shift will be very helpful for solving our personal problems. I don't know if problems is the right term, personal challenges, our group challenges, and even if we're called at a larger community or country or even world level.
Yes, that makes sense. And I'm perceiving, yes, much higher problem solving or challenge solving, but also with that, the same ability brings also creativity, higher creativity. Creating new solutions. Well, it goes along with the problem solving, but sometimes it may apply to anything else than a challenge of the pure creativity with a higher process, a higher mode of operation, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe one example that is very relevant for people here is, at some point, maybe in our lives, in our path, in this life, we are more three-dimensional. Like maybe we saw out of our eyes, and what we see out of our eyes is what's real, physical eyes, and out of our five senses. And then maybe we had like a first awakening, or maybe we took our first healing class or clairvoyant sensing class, and we're able to have a deeper experience of, let's say, the etheric body, not just intellectually, of course, it might have started that way, but experientially, or maybe some people were born able to see the energies. So then when you look at a person, even though they look calm on the outside, you can kind of see maybe their aura is like a little bit like intensely red or murky red. So you kind of know, I'm just using that as an example, maybe they're agitated or angry, or you could just feel that you may not see colors. And so you're seeing deeper into what they really are. And if your intention is compassion or a sense of helping, then you might not, even though they're trying to act calm in front of you, you might not push your agenda or push something or make them do something at that moment, because really they're ultimately not feeling so good, they're agitated. So I mean, it's a kind of a very simple example, but as we're able to embody these deeper levels of reality and see them directly or perceive them, like you were mentioning and we were talking, you become a better problem solver, a better helper in situations.
Yes, yes, beautiful. Very beautiful and inspiring perspective. So with that, I was being shown kind of the image, the vision very much. You said that you mentioned that you journeyed to go and meet or be with the Arcturians and find out what they wanted you to bring to Graceful Connections. And I'm being shown how they kind of gave you a basket. I'm seeing a little basket that was given to you that, okay, this is what you're going to bring to them. So now let's unpack this basket, which is a brand new offering that is exclusive for Graceful Connections. And again, I love how it matches so well the intentions and the frequency of grace and the orb of grace. So in your basket is a series of Arcturian transmissions for non-dual love, compassion, and bliss. And we'd love to hear all about it. So everyone to follow Jean, just simply scroll down to access, scroll down the page to access and review Jean's special offer. Jean, would you reveal what you have in your basket, what you have created along with the Arcturians for our audience?
Yeah. So this format's a live format. It's like a little bit like a mini retreat because it's over 3 days. And although we're meeting for about 2 hours and depending on the discussion, maybe 2.5 hours, and all of it's recorded. So you can, actually be there live or you can take it whenever your schedule fits. But the field is sort of open for those 3 days. So it's a little bit like you can also treat it as sort of like a retreat setting or just use the recordings in that way. So the format itself is kind of like very similar to creating this orb of grace. There's sort of a vortex field that's created, which is held by the higher beings, the people who are participating, as well as like I've invited the angelic beings and Arcturians in particular, and the divine to hold that space. So there's kind of a continuous download during the 3 days, but specifically then there's a theme for each of those 2 hours. So the basic structure is like the first part of that hour is about a 50-minute transmission on the theme where we're downloading sort of this energetic information, in particular from the Arcturians. And then I'll kind of come to the theme of each day after I describe the structure. Then after that 50-minute transmission, we take a short break just to integrate that, which I think is important to kind of bring through in maybe a super conscious way, the energetic information into the 7 subtle bodies. And then we have a short discussion on the topics because intellectually it's good to understand how to maybe bring those things through an embodied way or practices. And then we also do a pillar of light meditation where bringing through that same energetic information, we sort of meditate on the different chakras, which I can talk about, or the energy centers, which is a way of, again, expressing that energetic information into the 7 subtle bodies so that all the way to the physical plane, so we can start to utilize that information that we received, as well as given, so it's kind of a two-way resonance exchange. But the 3 themes of the transmission is what we had been mentioning: the non-dual love, non-dual compassion, and non-dual bliss. So I just kind of mention a little bit about what those topics would entail. So I think the best way is to compare someone who hasn't really had those experiences of non-duality, sort of ourself before, and then we have a deeper glimpse or even a sustained glimpse of non-duality of ourself, kind of our unified state of consciousness, kind of what I was calling stepping out of the cube of space-time. And then we come back. And so how do we bring that back to those same sort of topics? So usually in the love, particularly if we think of it romantic love, but even any form of love, let's say for a parent or a pet or for a thing or experience, before unity consciousness usually has some form of needs. Like, and we still may be there too, but maybe it's lessened after having that experience or through our own personal evolution. Doesn't have to be through non-duality, but we're sort of like we like things, in its extreme description. We like things where our needs are met, and then if our needs aren't met, we tend not to like things, and this can always be taken to an extreme. When we go into the non-dual state, we have this direct experience of the unified state of consciousness, maybe this universal love, where there's no subject object, so you can't really need anything from anything because you are all things in that experience. But then we come back again into our space-time personality, and so the needs are lessened, or our relationships, whether they're romantic or however we may describe them, as a parent, as a child, as a friend, we start to lessen again. It's like we've stepped out of the dream and we're coming back into the dream. But since we've had that shaking of the dream, it's not as serious to us. And so we may no longer have that many needs or even any in our kind of highest moments. And so we're able to kind of be fully giving at that time. So the transmission is to kind of help us in that process, wherever you fall in that continuum on that theme of non-dual love. And then as we move on to the non-dual compassion, I think that's more the embodiment of how do we actually bring that out into the world. We've all had that sense of compassion. Maybe we have it most highly when we've with a pet that we may have, but it could be with a child, it could be with a partner, a romantic partner, a parent, it could be with just any relationship that was our experience of compassion. And then how do we begin to expand that after we've realized we're already unified with everything? Is actually the deepest sense of reality. But then we for whatever reason came back into this space-time dimension. So then how do we actually bring that out? Maybe we could even call this the service, which many people, maybe everyone here has already been on that path. But then how do we bring that non-dual sense of we are unified, but then I'm back here and there's people who seem to still not really recognize that unified consciousness. How do I bring that out to them? So that's the second transmission and topic. And then finally, the bliss is, we have these deepest states of bliss. Even the orgasmic state could be a concept of that. And many people do actually experience even non-duality through a sense of almost like a spiritual sex, or when they're in that blissful state, they even enter a deep state of consciousness. And then they come back, and then everything they do is embodied in that bliss. So everything doesn't have to be through the sexual act. They're always in a blissful, non-dual state of consciousness. And that can be used in meditation, that can be used in our daily life. So there's people who seem to always be happy, and sometimes that's subconscious or unconscious. That's their disposition. And then some kind of even yogic practitioners have developed that, taken that state of bliss and then imbued it in everything they do, from walking around to eating, to meditating, to talking to someone. There's always that deep sense of not just a unified state of consciousness, but it's imbued with that blissful state, and which helps a person really focus and bring a very high frequency to this non-dual state of consciousness.
Wow. Yeah. What I'm hearing as you're describing, Jean, is that this will allow us to upgrade our ability to operate in the reality, in the dual world of reality, to operate with these non-dual love, compassion, and bliss, right?
Yeah, exactly. And just using maybe a framework people would be very familiar with. It's like we're upgrading our chakras, to be able to hold that frequency. Like that blissful state is usually in the central channel. People, yogic practitioners will access this non-dual consciousness, but a blissful state of consciousness through the chakras. And as you do those practices, it's a way, like you're saying, to kind of slowly upgrade your consciousness, but also the subtle bodies that would hold that frequency. So it's almost like we're upgrading the channels and the chakras to kind of hold a more divine level of fuel, so to speak.
Right. And I am also perceiving that as we upgrade and as we hold more of those higher frequencies, we become instruments of entraining others, and our presence becomes an emanation of these qualities of non-dual love, compassion, and bliss, and we become, or we either we become or we add elements to our service by naturally holding these high frequencies and sharing them, emanating them around us, and then training them for others, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it could be a natural process, much like you see a flower, like as a metaphor, one that's vibrant, healthy, and alive, or it could be a tree, compared to one maybe that isn't healthy at the moment. And we're all very sensitive to the chi or prana aspect that would be one-dimensional state. So it's as if we're raising that frequency, and just by being who we are, it sort of benefits, just like the fragrance of a flower. It just is being who it is, and it's benefiting those who come into its like orbit.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. So I have a couple of let's say practical questions to ask you to clarify for those. I'm sure that many in the audience are familiar with your work, Jean, and with the experience of the receiving the Arcturian frequencies, but some may not. So let's clarify a couple of things. First, is this accessible to anyone? Is there any prerequisite? Do we need to have any previous experience with the Arcturian frequencies, or can we just jump right into the non-dual love, compassion, and bliss, even if we had no previous experience?
But yes, there's no requirement for previous either trainings or experiences to partake in the transmissions.
So it is very accessible. Now, I'm hearing it may open someone's appetite for more. And since you're offering so many, and you're, yes, being given, I suppose, assignments or agreements to bring so many transmissions on so many various themes, so that it may open someone's appetite for exploring more. And that's wonderful. So the other question is, I love the format that is kind of, as you said, a mini retreat, an intensive, right? 2 hours or maybe even more per day for 3 days. That being said, and the live experience, but also it can very well be, and I'm totally witness of that, I've experienced a good number of your transmissions with the recording, with the replay, because sometimes the live transmission doesn't work for my schedule. So I can absolutely testify that working with the recording, the replay is the absolute exact same experience and outcomes. The question is, it's not only about these 3 days, right? We can keep working with the recordings in the future. And is there any recommendation that you have, or do we just sense how to work with them? What would you say about that?
Yes, yes. So the recordings are like energetic tools and that one can continue to use, like what Sophie was mentioning. And I like that analogy of sort of like the water filtering through, in this case, thousands of years and until it like ends up in the stream, or even a couple of days from like the top of Mount Shasta melting into the stream that's below in the picture. So the transmission is sort of like a download. And usually, if you're really on the fast track and you really wanted to kind of focus on one theme, then I usually suggest 3 days before you do the transmission again. And in those 3 days, like there's enough energetic information to let it kind of percolate in your seven subtle bodies and consciousness. People sometimes even do it quicker or even do multiple transmissions a day and they just feel guided, and I say go for that if that's kind of coming in up in you. But usually if you wanted some suggestion, so the fastest is another in the next 3 days, but some people will then feel once is enough, or they do it once a week, or at some schedule that feels appropriate to them. And then the meditation is more something that can be a practice that builds your seven subtle bodies consciously. So those meditations could even be done daily, although maybe not everyone has that amount of time. So that can be done a little more regularly. And I think that's a very powerful way to build our seven subtle bodies, which we may not have talked so much about the centers, or we'll get a chance a little later in this talk. But those can be done, more regularly, depending on one's schedule.
Mhm. Can we use them in our sleep as well? Would they be efficient?
Yeah, some people actually put it on loop, the transmission, particularly. The meditation is usually something you do more consciously and even vertically with your spine vertical. But the transmissions, some people play it right before they fall asleep. It actually helps them fall asleep. And some people have even looped it kind of in the volume. Actually, don't even need to play the volume for the transmission to occur, or they put it very low.
Right. Great. So it's wonderful that we we get so many ways to work, to play, to experiment, and we can pretty much count on being guided if we are attentive. I believe that we get the prompts on how to experience this, and it may vary over time for a specific person, right? But if we pay attention, I believe that we can be guided to what's the best way to go through this experience and to make the best of it for ourselves personally. But it's great that there are so many opportunities. So that's really wonderful. Now, one last question about this before we go to experiencing and a transmission. How do I know if this is for me, other than having shivers of truth or getting the sense that, oh yes, this is for me? Are there any indicators that you would recognize that that it would be an indication for someone?
Mhm. Yeah, I think the first indication or what this might help serve in terms of a person's life or path is kind of an acceleration on their spiritual path. Having this non-dual state. Maybe someone hasn't had it yet, but has become interested in that term, or even just found themselves, let's say, on this interview, kind of that vibration attracted them at some level. And the transmissions and the meditations, because it's on that topic, can be assisted that one could have that more of those states, or even a initial state of non-duality. So that's a very profound experience. And then again, like I said, there's a process of embodying it. The second group on that kind of spiritual process or purpose is people who have had the non-dual state, who want to embody it more. Like, how can I bring that more into my daily life? Like, I've had great experiences in retreat on transmissions and healings, but then I'm not necessarily feeling that I can bring that like to my kids or to my relationship with my husband or to my wife or my partner or to my work, for example. So I would say that would be another group of people where this could be very helpful. And then I think a third group would be those who might think or feel they need some healing at some level. Because even though the topics are more in the sort of love, compassion, and bliss level, because we're in that field of the Arcturians, there's sort of like healing that goes on all levels because that is sort of their background frequency or intention. So there may be people who feel that this field that they're feeling, or maybe after we do the transmission, that energy could be very healing for them, whether it's physical, energetic, emotional, mental, or on some spiritual level. So I'd say that would be a third group.
Right. Yeah. Because I'm sensing someone who experiences friction with reality, friction with the duality of reality, and struggles with the love, the compassion, the bliss. Through the transmissions are going to take care of healing, clearing, resolving, doing whatever it takes to dissolve or eliminate or whatever it does technically, what prevents one from experiencing this non-dual love, what prevents one from experiencing, knowing and experiencing non-dual compassion and non-dual bliss. So that's the healing dimension that is inherent to the transmissions, I guess.
Yes, very much so. And so I think that could be very helpful on that level. And also, people who are facilitators may find ways to kind of bring their experience of these topics of non-duality, whether that be in the love, compassion, or bliss category, or just their transmission of non-duality. The Arcturian connection may also help them bring that through for those who they're either serving or teaching or facilitating. And then I think of the other categories, some people may just want to make that feel very connected to the Arcturians or want to make a connection to the Arcturians. So this could also serve as that kind of platform.
Beautiful. So there's some for every taste and so many reasons, so many motivations and inspirations. Very beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for offering this. To make it clear, these are brand new transmissions, right? Like they have never been transmitted yet so far. Is that correct?
Yes, this was brand new. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. So thank you. Thank you for the exclusivity. And it is such a beautiful combination. I love this trilogy. I absolutely love this trilogy. Very graceful. So thank you, Jim. And thank you to the Arcturians for this offering. So I think now is really the perfect time to have an experience right now, a taste of the Arcturian frequencies with an Arcturian non-dual love transmission. So if there's anything that you need to tell us about it before you get started, then please do. And when you're ready, we are delighted to receive them. Thank you.
Yeah. So mostly if this is new to you, it's similar to receiving an energy healing. I don't really need to be speaking when it's happening, although I will, so that you kind of don't feel, there's just silence. But the energy is kind of come directly into your energetic field, and maybe the recording or is an anchor in my voice for that experience to occur. And this will be the type of energies and information that will come down in the training or in the retreat for the Arcturian non-dual love topic. But this is in itself is self-contained. So if you have any particular intention around that aspect, maybe it is to deepen or experience non-duality, and then it may be to embody that in what we call our relationships of love in this world, in the space-time world, uh, but with a non-dual perspective. And that could be another intention one might have. The final intention is that you may not consciously need to set a specific one. It could be quantum or open, meaning whatever your system needs or your higher self feels it needs, and it could be unpacking in the future, will also be received. Okay. You can just relax and the energies are starting. We're beginning the Arcturian non-dual love transmission. If you had any specific intentions, you can silently state them for the type of experience or energetic information you'd like to receive. And for most of the transmission, I'll just be silent, and then every so often I'll say something to sort of prompt where we are in the transmission. If you like, you can just relax and just allow the energetic information to wash over you. Just trust that you're receiving from your highest self and guides the appropriate energetic information. Now we're entering a second deepening cycle in the transmission, which will deepen the information we receive and take it deeper into our 7 subtle bodies. Finally, we're entering the third and final deepest cycle, entering even into the non-dual state. You may even disappear for a moment or just really enter a quietness or a stillness. Simply being very normal, just as you are. Also is the natural state of mind or non-dual state. The witness. That completes the transmission. You can gently but firmly come back to your physical body now, moving your fingers and your toes, coming completely back to your physical body now. And when you feel comfortable, you can open your eyes and snap your fingers.
Thank you. Don't really want to come back, but but we'll come back to this conversation. Thank you so much. Cool. It's so very impressive. What's even, are there even words to describe? Is it the potency, the efficiency, and the speed as well? Like this was a maybe 5 minute experience that we had that was so very palpable, and that is so effortless to receive, to experience, even though I'm sure that everyone has their own experience, and there may be a conscious experience, there may be no particular conscious experience, and yet something's going on. That's the first comment I'm getting to make on the super high speed of the transmission, but also the receiving, the absorbing. One thing that's interesting to me, that one awareness that was given to me, is how right away how the heart rejoices in that, no matter where we are on this journey towards non-dual love, there's always more. There's always more refinement that can be accessed. And I was shown, it's interesting because I was shown a parallel with how so many of us have experienced, oh, there's always more, but more in an almost annoying way. There's always more healing to do, or there's always, oh, I've worked on this issue, but it keeps coming back, and there's always more. And we do have, so many of us have this experience that there's always more, but it's not been always such a good news. But kind of the flip side of it, in that no matter where we are, again, with this experience and awareness and embodiment of the non-dual love, there's always more, and that's something to rejoice. It's, yeah, like the flip side of that coin.
Yeah, very, very much so. And I think what you mentioned, I found the Arcturians and kind of galactic connections maybe people made, they can work very quickly. Of course, it can be overwhelming if sort of like so the intensity can be high if the time is short. So that's why sometimes transmissions are spread out so that the same amount of information, energetic information, can be transmitted, but at a slower rate, so we can kind of absorb it like drinking from a fountain rather than a fire hose. But if it can actually come through very quickly, and then the unpacking may take this is what takes time because to adjust to our system.
Right. Yeah. So that was 5 minutes in during the 3 sessions of 2 hours. There's a 50 minutes transmission. Is there more to it, or is it the spreading, or is it a combination of spreading over more time to allow for maybe an easier receiving for some?
Yeah, I think there's more during that 50 minutes. And then it's specific to the group that shows up. Like, I think I found the transmissions are very much specific to who will actually hear that transmission. So it doesn't only have to be people who are listening in this now. Of course, it was recorded, but it could be past, present, and future, as well as parallel dimensions. So there may even be beings who are benefiting from the energies who are not even incarnated.
Mm.
So, but it would be like specific to, this that occurred in this morphic field, and then the one that will occur, even though it's the same topic and energetic information, the people and even the beings who would be there would probably be a little bit of a different mix.
Right, yeah, for sure. And I'm being kind of shown an image. It's kind of in a cartoony, fun and nice kind of picture to, I guess, to convey the benevolence of this, how the Arcturians are showing, oh, this is just a little sample. You get a taste of it. You get a taste of it. We're just going to give you a taste of it now, right now. But the real thing, even though this was the real thing, but there's the taster and there's the full-on transmission, right? And we get the taster.
Yeah, yeah, and miraculous things could happen in that 5 minutes too. So
Absolutely, absolutely, definitely. And also I'm being shown as it's so fascinating how actually so much comes out of these 5 minutes. Yes, and as we unpack, which is so important, that in these 2 hour sessions there is time to unpack and to have sharings with you, Jean, and with the participants, because verbalizing our experiences help to own them and to figure them out and to bring more of the meaning of it, of what's been going on. There's something also to the trilogy, that when the full-on transmissions are going to happen, not the taster of today, there's something to the trilogy of, and the sequence, the love, compassion, and bliss, and to the three of them being brought together in some kind of not some kind, in a unity. And like it is a trilogy, and there's something to the trilogy, even though each transmission is of its own. There's something to the combination of them, there's a synergy, right, that's gonna take place.
well, yes, very much so. Yeah, I think it's in that entire download, even though they're separated into three, it's kind of a complete package, like you said, that's made up of those three.
And what I'm getting as well is that we get a taster today, we get a sampler, which is a good way also for our higher selves and higher team to start to prepare us to receive the real complete, the full-on complete 3 transmissions. There's something to it as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So there could be this initial download. It could even be the fourth transmission is this one, and then sort of
Yeah.
unpacking over the linear time until the three transmissions.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's how it feels. Yes. Okay. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for offering this. I'm hearing invaluable experience. It is an invaluable experience, and very unique, very precious, very graceful. Definitely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Arcturians, and every one of the beings who participated in this transmission. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, thanks. I'm glad we were able to, yeah, do that.
Now, before giving you the closing word, Jean, I'd like to wrap up. So inviting you all, again, scroll down the page to discover or review into details Jean's exclusive and brand new set of Arcturian frequencies, Arcturian non-duality transmission series. So it is 3 live sessions of 2 hours each, plus the recordings, over 3 consecutive days. So that's a mini retreat, not so mini. It's kind of, it feels like a pretty solid retreat. And it's going to be composed of the Arcturian non-dual love transmission on the first day, second day, Arcturian non-dual compassion transmission, third day, Arcturian non-dual bliss transmission. And it's very generously priced and with a 2 payment plan, making it very accessible. And this is really all about love on all levels, compassion in its deepest form, and bliss as a mode of natural connection to the world. So if you're interested, if it resonates, if it intrigues you, please join. Let's get on board. And before that, we'll meet again on Friday, July 14th for a Q&A Galore live call. Jean will take your questions, which can be about issues or healing intentions, and he will run Arcturian healing method frequencies for you and for the whole group on those issues and intentions. So it's going to be a very powerful and profound time of healing, as everyone will benefit from the transmissions that Jean will offer in response to each personal request. And thank you in advance for that, Jean. I love that you make yourself available with the Arcturians to support our audience and our community. Thank you so much. Yes.
I'm looking forward to it.
And for everyone, if you can't attend the live call with Jean, make sure to place your request in advance, and then you'll catch up with the replay to receive from Jean the Arcturian frequency transmission that answers your question. Now, before we close, Jean, is there any word that you would like to offer? You've offered a lot already, so.
Well, yeah, no, thanks first for this great conversation, and everyone who joined in. It's been wonderful to be in everyone's energy, or feeling the great love and energy here, and particularly Sophie, this whole telesummit that you've created of light, and with all the consciousness and mindfulness of it and the beauty. And yeah, I think what's coming through is just the fact that we live in a multidimensional world. Everyone here and more people are coming into that recognition and receiving guidance directly from, we might call them spiritual beings or consciousness that's within our midst. And it's really infinite when we realize it. There's all different planes and frequencies to connect to, and these calls and telesummits and chances to kind of just intentionally be together allows, I think, those higher beings a chance to kind of bring their light and flame through, and as well as us to bring our light into the inner worlds also. So it's kind of this two-way resonance street. So
absolutely, yes, absolutely. It does definitely feel so, and that's the experience. And thank you to you, Jean, for, well, having agreed to be part of it and bringing this. Really, to me, it is such an amazing contribution that you're bringing with the Arcturians on this specific topic. I'm really so very grateful. Now let's take a moment to be present once again to the orb of grace, allowing it to remain there, to hold us, to hold all that we have received today. We have received so much in words and way beyond the words and experiences, all that we have received consciously, all that we are not even yet aware that we have received. Allowing the orb of grace to hold us as we integrate, allowing it all to settle within our being. holding us in grace. For as long as it serves our highest good, our evolution, and the highest good of all. And I'm closing now with gratitude to each and every one of you in the audience. Thank you for answering yes to the calling of grace, to the calling of the Arcturians. Yes, for this gathering. It is a very special gathering. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, immense thank you to you, Jean, for all the wisdom, the brilliance, the offerings. You have gifted us the experiences, the perspectives, along with the Arcturians, and through all the graceful connections that have been woven with you and with your masterful expertise. Thank you for having joined us today in the Orb of Grace. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And we give immense gratitude also to Christel Hughes and the Academy for the Soul for offering this platform in which graceful connections grow and expand, impacting our lives, our environment, and the world at large. Gratitude to the Orb of Grace for providing a safe, sacred space for this journey of exploration that we are engaged on together. Gratitude for all the grace that we are blessed with at every moment, whether we are aware of it or not. It is offering all the nourishment, the nurturing, the healing, the revelations, the realizations that we open our hearts to receive all along this journey. Gratitude to our higher selves and all the higher beings that guide, support, and protect us. Gratitude to the divine. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Until we meet again, many graceful blessings to you all. Thank you, Jean. Thank you to the Arcturians. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you.